Hello and welcome to today's podcast, which is focusing on the educational sector. And I've got two great guests that are joining us today, and I'll introduce them in a second. But my name's Chris White, and I'm Head of Cyber and Innovation for the Cyber Resilience Centre for the South East. So first up, we've got Heather Hadfield. Hope you're okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I'm Heather Hadfield. I'm the consortium manager at South East Grid for Learning. We're a consortium of 11 local authorities across the southeast of England, and primarily looking after supporting them with things like broadband, online safety, cybersecurity, aspects of technology in schools.
Marvellous, thank you. And last but not least, Dai Thomas. Hope you're okay.
Hello, hi, yeah, fine, Chris, thanks. My name's Dai Thomas. I'm Director of Digital Services and Digital Learning at a small academies trust called Sussex Learning Trust, mostly based in Cuckfield in Sussex. And we were a DFE demonstrator school, advising schools about their EdTech use in the last round. And we're also an Apple Distinguished School in the UK.
And not forgetting probably a very busy school as well, I guess.
Yeah.
No worries. But the plan for today is we're just going to pose some questions to and fro to see that others can help from some guidance which we can provide, some instances that we've probably experienced. But we've got a couple of questions set up. So let's pop it off with number one. So why is the educational sector, why do you think they're so at risk from cyber attacks? And I guess I could throw that one out to Dai.
I think really one of the reasons I find is that people are not maybe giving their, I mean I just use an analogy that a lot of schools have got a risk or business continuity plan for snow, but not for cyber attack. Does that make sense? So I think really there's a lot of risk is something that schools are well used to doing, really. Risk management, risk registers now being a very important part of school, but actually from my experience, they're not really seeing that as a big risk. Of course, it's been highlighted very recently that it's more risk than perhaps they think. So it's definitely, from my point of view, Chris, just a lack of planning and lack of thinking and giving it perhaps the kudos it deserves, really.
I've got you, and I totally understand that as well, because I see that from quite a few organisations. There's terminology which is a little bit alien sometimes: business continuity and disaster recovery, just practicing for when it all goes wrong, to try and reduce the disruption and the impact. And schools are great, because I remember my primary school days, and we used to do the fire alarm drills every Friday. So as an adult, I'm pretty comfortable, whatever building I'm in, if the fire alarm goes off, I know to follow the green route and get out of the building as safely as possible. Those are the comfortable things that we're all good with. First aid and CPR, we all know what happens or what to do when someone falls over. But it's this uncomfortable, the new threat from cyber, which we haven't practiced because we haven't experienced it, and we're just a little bit nervous about it. And I think, like you said, Dai, that's probably one of the biggest risks, isn't it? It's because we're uncomfortable with it. I don't know if Heather, you've got anything to add on that one.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, a lot of schools out there are not technology experts. Even if you look at big organisations, businesses, and they've got a whole team of security experts and technologists within that firm, they still get attacked. They still have breaches. So I think if you look at a school setting, they're there to educate, and they hold a lot of data, which obviously makes them vulnerable for people who want to do ransomware attacks, which is what is happening at the moment. And they're just lack of understanding of the technology that's required, or the processes and the questions to ask suppliers or their IT providers. It's not there. So that's just opening them up to a greater risk, I guess, from attacks, because there's just that knowledge, that gap of knowledge, of technical knowledge, and really understanding what they have to have in place to mitigate the risk and to reduce it as much as possible.
Totally, it's good stuff. That I think what normally helps is case studies, either recent case studies or practical examples of where maybe it didn't go as well as what it could have gone, I certainly get past the crime data, the weekly crime data for whole areas, so I get to see what's going on in any organisation, and especially at the educational environment. I see how cyber incidents have taken them offline. Most modern schools are, and I've learned myself, modern schools, you pay by your fingerprint now these days for lunch, don't you? Whereas you queue up in the lunch queue, I used to have to get my money ready, but now it's all fingerprint payment systems. And then you've got the smart boards, quite a lot of things are printed. You've got door access control, you've got phone systems that rely on the internet. And when a cyber incident comes along, you've got to take into account that most of these systems are going to take you offline. So I know that does present some safeguarding issues when you don't have access to medical information to phone parents. You don't know some allergies that might be present. You can't access the CCTV systems. So you've got to consider what your plan B is if you have a cyber incident and practice that. But have either of you two got any examples of recent or local cyber incidents involving the education sector? Heather, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been quite a lot of press recently about various ransomware attacks on schools and groups of schools. And I'm not necessarily going to get in specifics about that, but I think the key lesson really to take home from that is one, saying to senior leaders and governors and heads, okay, if you lost all your data this afternoon, like what impact is that going to have on your school? And actually articulate it in that way, because I think like most organizations who have a cyber attack, they're kind of reactive. They're not planning. They haven't planned for it. They don't think it's going to happen to them. And I think senior leaders need to be aware, like visualize in their heads, okay, what impact would losing all our data through a ransom attack have on our school. So recently this did happen to some schools in our region, and it was understanding that concept of backing up data, for example. Our data's backed up, okay, but where is it backed up? How is it backed up? Is there an air gap between your different backups on site, off site, so that you can access the data? If you have an incident, you can get your data back fairly easy, so your school's up and running. Because if you can't, then you have to close right down. As you said, it's a safeguarding issue. You can't run a school without having that data, and so you're having to put teams together to deal with that. So it turns into a complete nightmare. So it's visualizing, and I guess talking through with senior leaders, looking at these case studies, looking at past attacks and saying, okay, if that happened to our school, what would we do? What's the effect on us? And kind of then working back and saying, okay, well, what do we need to put in place? What questions do we need to ask to stop that happening?
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's what Dai mentioned at the beginning, is having your business continuity plan in place before the actual incident happens. And I have seen some good and bad practices across the region when I've been visiting quite a few schools, ranging from the IT manager keeping a backup of all of the school's data on a memory stick, which was under their mattress. I would probably say that's not the best option, but at least it was an option. There are lots of solutions out there in relation to backups, and the two incidents that spring to mind I've dealt with was two different educational institutions were hit by ransomware. So I certainly know that both were compromised by the phishing email coming in, the staff member clicking on the link then taking them to a Moody website, which then enabled the malicious software to hit the computer, which then spread around all of the computers and took them offline and encrypted their data. And they phoned up, obviously, for help. And cutting a long story short, the ransom was effectively £50,000, and then after that process, they had to hire an IT contractor to then fix all the systems and restore them back to what they were previously, which was another £75,000. So all in all, the whole incident financially was £125,000, which is money that could be spent better elsewhere supporting the students. But it was the time abstraction as well, because sometimes I hear that to restore one laptop back to its original state could take up to 24 hours. So if you times that by how many laptops you have in your school, that is a long time abstraction, let alone the finances. So yes, and above all of that, the kids aren't going to learn when you're offline. I've heard the expression chalk and talk, and that can only last about 3 days, and then you run out of materials. So yeah, tough time for schools, but certainly if you practice and prepare and have your business continuity and plans, just like you do if you're first aid and fire and your extreme weather, you can reduce the impact and disruption immensely. So I guess why are cyber criminals so interested in the information that schools possess? Di, do you fancy picking this one up?
Oh, I just think cyber criminals are interested in information, aren't they, Chris? Anything that they can see, information is saleable, isn't it? Information, any kind of information, whether it's education system or a business or wherever, personal information is interesting. One of my roles is data protection officer for the trust. So obviously I deal with that kind of personal level of information every day, and obviously people have got a real concern about their personal information these days. I suppose in a way, information is worth something, and the knowledge of that information is worth something. So I don't really see that they're maybe more interested in schools than other places. I think schools can be vulnerable targets. I know that cyber criminals have taken the opportunity during COVID, to try and send certain spoof emails and spam emails to schools, under the guise of COVID help support, stuff like that. But I guess that's my view on it. It's really about information in general. They're probably interested in that really as a saleable commodity and what they can coerce, with withholding it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of the incidents I've dealt with, again, I would say a school is no different to any old business, is it? It holds data about its staff, which could be anything from payroll data to pension data. Then it holds details about its clients or customers. In this case, we call them students, wouldn't we, and pupils. Again, personal data, name, date of birth, home address, phone numbers. All of the data's there, and it all obviously needs protecting. And then you've got exam results and homework, and again, coursework. Heaven forbid you had that cyber incident just after everyone submitted their homework, that it could be lost, couldn't it? Which is crazy times, totally crazy. But
I think with schools, just to add to that, they do hold sensitive information. So, you will have some children there who have health needs, social and emotional needs, family dynamics. That you might have children who are escaping domestic abuse. There's a whole raft of situations that schools are dealing with, and that information is very sensitive. So I think, okay, that's the fairly sort of extreme end, but they still hold that information, and it's very private. So it's important that that's kept out of the it's kept very private.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly one instance springs to mind is a school had the impersonation attack. So someone pretended to be the school, managed to get details of the parents and sent an email out to all the parents asking for term fees to be paid in advance. And then obviously the money was going to be sent to the criminal's bank account, not the school's account. But it was the school that effectively was being impersonated by their email system. So, I mean, that goes quite nicely onto what things could a school do to enhance their cybersecurity. And the first one for me would be to prevent impersonation of emails. There are some pretty simple controls which you can configure your systems to do. And if I said one of them is something called DMARC, so it protects your school from having its email system impersonated. But again, I wouldn't really expect a head teacher or a business support manager to know how to configure their systems to utilize something called DMARC email protection, because all of a sudden, I know people are probably going to be shaking their head right now going, Chris, what on earth is DMARC? And I get that. It's technical jargon, but I guess one each. What cybersecurity control would be your favourite then to protect a school? Di? I think you're on mute, Di, but we can rerun.
Sorry, yeah, excuse me.
Yeah,
it's
no.
not my
Let me hold and go back and say just for the benefit of Sean, I'll go so what cybersecurity control would you pick, Di, to best protect a school?
Yeah, I think my favourite is probably not going to be technical. It's going to be cultural, which is obviously the real difficult one, isn't it? But it's really awareness of all staff, isn't it? So one of the instance I got involved with a little while ago was just a spoof attack, really, on our email system. So basically, asking users to log into something from an email link, and then obviously that something is not genuine. It's a falsified login prompt that then scrapes people's usernames and passwords, basically. And so I think that's all to do with awareness, of making sure that people are checking things. So, for instance, if they go into a web system, which this was, and they see a login prompt, just glance up to the URL, just glance up to the web address. Does it look like it normally looks? Is it going to I think you used the term moody, Chris, some moody website,
That's a great example, because your staff, your personnel, they are quite frankly, your first and last line of defense for quite a few cyber attacks. Even like strangers walking around a building in a physical environment, if they're not wearing a staff ID or a contractor or visitor, if you don't recognize them, you're comfortable enough to challenge them and say, get out of my school. But realistically, we don't invest the similar amounts of effort and training into cyber. And I would definitely recommend it. There's a massive good point that don't forget that all our staff and our workforces do have their home email addresses, and they do have their own bank accounts, mortgages and savings accounts. And the training will benefit them as a person, a human, not just as an asset of your school. Because you can click on a link at home and quite easily enter your bank account at home, as well as clicking on a link at school and emptying the school's bank account. The same rules apply. So if you have the opportunity to invest in your staff some security awareness training, I would brand it up to say this is cyber training for you as a person rather than you as an asset at a school. And I've seen countless times where you get better buy-in, because staff, I've been to training myself as a pressed person, and it's, you must do your annual mandatory training, whatever the topic is, and you don't want to be there. But cyber impacts us on all homework and play. Heather, have you got a favourite security control which you can see save a school?
Well, and Dai kind of nabbed mine. I'm not a technical person, so from a technical standpoint, I'm a bit limited on my knowledge. But I would say, from the people side of things, we all know that actually people within your organisation, whether that's school or business, are the gatekeepers, and it's that side of digital empathy, I think, when it comes to training as well, like understanding the different roles people have in their organisation. And what I would say is, quite often technologists say, right, well, you have to do X, you have to do Y, that will keep us super safe, but they've never done the role of a bursar or a teacher in the classroom, and actually realizing, asking to jump through three different hoops to log in, and that they'll just go, actually, this is really sort of being a blocker to what I want to do, and they go around it in some way, then you've got two problems, and I think it's understanding what people's roles, how they use technology within the school, and direct your training, your cybersecurity training around that, and maybe just sit with them sometimes and look at what they do on a day-to-day basis, because everyone uses there are some people within a school environment, for example, the bursars, who are obviously very much dealing with financial side of things. So it's understanding, as you're saying, the URLs and what you're looking for from their point of view. A teacher, well, you're probably going to be focusing on slightly different things, and I think that is key. And I heard someone recently say that cybersecurity should be an investment, not a cost, and I think that's a really good thing to bear in mind for schools. Schools are strapped for cash at the best of times, but I do think if you can embed cybersecurity within your budgeting as a constant rolling thing, then you're putting yourself in a good place. It's not something you just spend a bit of money on once in a while. It's something you've got to drip feed. It's a bit like how I look at it is the online safety that we were starting to talk about a long time ago, and now schools are really doing this on a regular basis, and that's kind of what has to happen with cybersecurity. It's something we then need to think of in a very more of a holistic way. It's not something we just tackle for one day in an inset. It's something that we have to constantly have on our minds, just like we do with safeguarding. Because ultimately it does come under safeguarding, really, doesn't it?
I think you're absolutely right about safeguarding, because that's the way almost to, it could be a way, Chris, actually, to really give it kudos in schools. Does that make sense? That it's just part of the safeguarding training that you do, because you are actually, after all, safeguarding some very vulnerable or sensitive data, as Heather's just said, with school students, and therefore you are protecting them. I use a similar approach with GDPR, with data, and so I just try and teach staff that GDPR is just another safeguarding measure. Does that make sense? So, and a lot of teachers, they give time to safeguarding. They know how important it is. I take your point, Chris, about sitting there with some mandatory training. And as a teacher, I've done loads of it over 30 odd years. But you tend to, when you do safeguarding with staff, they kind of perk up. They go, hey, this is really important stuff. And I think you're right, Heather. It should be absolutely pigeonholed under safeguarding. I think that's a really good idea, actually.
It does. Cyber safeguarding. You have the ability to, sadly, expose kids' data, expose them to things they would never have seen, and the computers have allowed it. So it's configuring and getting proper safeguarding of the computers, and knowing what to do when it starts to go wrong. So yeah, I think we've covered off quite a few points there during the last 20 minutes. I'd probably say yes, one of the biggest threats to schools is ransomware, because once it gets in, it prevents you from getting access to your own data. And one of the best solutions to ransomware is having a good backup in place. Yes, it's going to cost you some time to restore it back to what everything was before the incident, but you've got that golden copy of all of the data. So if the inevitable does happen, at least you've got your plan B and you can recover from it. Again, I'd probably say the Cyber Resilience Centre for the South East, we've been created by the Home Office. We're in the area to help anyone that wants some guidance. Certainly the issues of setting the computers up correctly, we'd encourage the government scheme of Cyber Essentials. So there's quite a few security controls on Cyber Essentials, which is anything from having a good passphrase. I've used the word passphrase rather than password, because I think we need to get better at our passwords. Having antivirus, having it up to date, having it all turned on and getting its daily updates of the latest threats is pretty important. Having an operating system, again, so if there's any of you out there that is using Windows XP, I'd hope you're not, but if you are, you need to move on. Certainly move on from Windows 7 as well, and be looking at the latest operating systems, because they're the ones that are being patched. They're the ones that, for instance, companies like Microsoft are making sure that all the vulnerabilities and bugs are removed. They aren't supporting the older systems anymore. So if you are using them, and I know you might not have a budget to update the software, at the very least unplug them from the internet so they can't be attacked from the outside, if that's not an option for you. But yeah, get in touch with us at the Cyber Resilience Centre, or speak to Dai, speak to Heather. We're all here for that guidance, and we can help you through some of those uncomfortable journeys that we know are ahead of you. And if you want to get in touch, certainly we can show you some free of charge opportunities and solutions that schools can take advantage of, because I know there's this fear out there that cybersecurity costs an awful lot of money, but I'll try to remove that, and there are a lot of value for money and free of charge solutions out there as a school that you can use, and that's whether you're public or private. But yeah, I guess that's probably a wrap. But Dai, anything you want to add?
Yeah, the only observation I've got is I've just got in front of me a really big subscription service that schools buy into. I won't mention its name, obviously, but under critical incident plans, it's got what you should include. So there's everything from serious injury, significant damage to school property, severe weather, public health, and disasters in the local community, but nothing to do with cyber resilience. and this
Wow.
is the other question that we've got to say, and perhaps is my final and but quite big point really. We've got to make sure that when we're talking good stuff like we talked today, that it's coming from everywhere, isn't it? This is a premium subscription service that a lot of senior managers, a lot of heads would actually buy into. Yeah. And it's not mentioned. I think that's a real shame.
It is a little bit, isn't it? Heather, closing remarks.
Oh, you've put me on the spot there. I just, yeah, I think it's, I think schools are really, obviously coming out of COVID. I think they're really struggling to get to grips with a lot of things. But I think with the way online learning has taken off and the adoption of cloud solutions and a lot more devices going out into the school environment, obviously cybersecurity has the sort of vulnerabilities, I guess, have risen quite significantly. And I think although schools have done an amazing job developing their knowledge in a very, very short space of time with regards to the kind of the pedagogy and what's been going on in the classroom, that it's left a bit of a gap with regards to, okay, we've got all this technology and that kind of security piece, the cybersecurity piece that comes after that, and understanding all that. And I think that's missing. And I think, to me, that's the biggest concern, is that there's been this huge push of digital technologies in school, and now there's kind of a bit of a lag with regards to the support and knowledge coming behind it from a technical standpoint and from a security standpoint.
Good points there, completely. Well, I guess all of us at Cyber Resilience Centre, Heather and Dai, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for all that's listening.
No problem. Bye.